Good morning, everyone. Hello? Am I muted?
No, you're not muted.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So if everyone could remain on mute until you're asked to speak, that would be great. Thank you very much. Are we ready to go? Emma?
Yes, all ready to go. Yep.
All right.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so if everyone could just remain on mute while I just do the introductions. Welcome to the Waverley Local Planning Panel meeting for the 22nd of March 2023. On behalf of the panel, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the Indigenous heritage of Waverley local government area and recognise the ongoing Aboriginal traditional custodianship of the land which forms this area. Today, the panel members are Jan Morell and Sharon Veal, expert members, and our community rep is Alison Small. And today I'm chairing the meeting and I'm Helen Lockhead. The public meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. On our agenda today, we have 7 items and each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the panel and then an alarm will sound. Please wrap up once the alarm is sounded, as we have a number of speakers to get through today. And also, if you could please remain on mute unless you've been called to speak to the panel. We have no apologies, but I'd just like to call on the panel to ask if they have any conflicts of interest at this point. Jan, do you have any conflicts? No, thank you. Sharon, do you have any conflicts that we need to
No, Helen.
Alison?
Yes, I do. 173 Blair Street.
Okay, so thank you. We might actually put Blair Street at the end for this purpose so that you can be excused for that issue. And other than that, we'll just proceed as the agenda is written. I do not have any conflicts to note at this point either. The panel have all undertaken site inspections independently and also via video links. The panel has been provided and read through each of your submissions, so please focus on the relevant planning considerations of concern associated with the application, and if other speakers before you have raised the same issues, please just reaffirm them rather than repeat them. At the conclusion of the meeting, we'll consider each application and the determination will be on the council's website as soon as possible. So I will now actually ask the first speaker to address the panel, and that is for the first item on the agenda, which is, sorry, I'm just 246 to 248 Campbell Parade, Bondi Beach, and we have 1 registered speaker on behalf of the applicant. We have no submissions speaking to this application, or this modification, I should say. But if Ted, you would like to address the panel, you must welcome to do so now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ted Yu, working with Willow Frank on behalf of the owners. We had a look at this, the meeting agenda beforehand, and we noticed this is the existing heritage listed building comprising 11 apartments, and what we're trying to getting approval for is the section 4.55, which is remove the car stakers and amalgamation of the 2 units, and also we want to de-amalgamate 2 other units, which was approved previously in the existing DA. So that's all from us. We have looked at the meeting agenda beforehand and noticed council has no objections or no comments for us to address, no issues for us to address. That's why I'm just here to answer questions and queries from council.
Panel, do you have any questions or comments that you'd like to make at this point? No?
No, thank you, Helen.
No. Okay. All right, thank you. We don't have any queries, Ted. We have all the information in front of us, so thank you for your time today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, so the next application is for alterations and additions to the residential flat building, Unit 404 at 10 Jacques Avenue, Bondi Beach. We have no submissions received, and we have registered speakers for the applicant, Al Khan and David Waghorn. So if you would like to address the panel, I invite you to do so now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David Waghorn from Planning Ingenuity. I'll start off. Look, I know you've got a long agenda, so I'll keep it brief. Just here really to thank the Council Assessment Officers, Joseph Somerville and Bridget McNamara. Look, we agree with the recommendation. We agree with the assessment. We agree with the conditions, and really just here to answer any questions.
Panel, I don't have any questions, but panel members, do you have any additional questions? It was a very succinct application, I think, and we completely understood what the intent was and what the potential impacts were and the assessment report. So thank you very much for your time to come present. Thank you.
Thank you, panel.
Okay. Sorry. The next application is for alterations and additions to a dwelling, including a new green roof to the rear garage at 7 Burke Street, Queen's Park. No submissions were received. Submissions that were received from the following, but we don't from the following speakers. Sorry, from the following respondents, James Robertson and Lorna Conlon, but no registered speakers are present for this application. In terms,
there was one speaker, Jenny Eskin.
oh, okay. Yeah. Sorry.
Yes.
That was the follow-up I see.
Yes. Okay. Sorry,
Yeah.
Jenny.
No, you're right.
Would you like to?
No problem. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Hopefully I won't keep you too long. Firstly, just like to advise that we...
Sorry, Jenny, just because I'm looking at the previous version of this agenda, can you please identify where you are from, and like with your address, for example, and like your...
Yes, so my name's Jenny Askin. I'm the planning consultant acting on behalf of the applicant, so the owner of 7 Burke Street. Okay, so yeah, I'd just like to confirm that we welcome the recommendation of the report, particularly with respect to FSR. As confirmed in the report, there are sufficient environmental planning grounds to justify the breach, noting in particular that there are no amenity issues as a result of the breach, and there's also a lack of impact in terms of the visual bulk of the building. In addition, Council has said that we've established that the proposal is consistent with the development standard and also consistent with the objectives of the zone. I just want to touch very briefly on the conditions of consent. There are 3 modifications required in condition 2. So no objection is raised to A or B, which relate to the front fence and the side boundary fence along the southern boundary. With respect to part C, the condition requires some additional landscaping, but it's actually been left quite open. So we're happy to provide landscaping between the pool and the covered area as suggested in the condition. And this would increase the landscaped area from, at the moment, existing on the site at the moment is 1.49%, and we would actually bring it up to 6.1%. The report did mention an 8.8% figure, but that's actually the square meterage, not the percentage. So we're happy with the intent of the condition to increase the landscaped area, and we could bring it up to 9.75 square meters as opposed to the 8.8 square meters, and that would be in the area between that covered area and the pool. I'd just like to reiterate, we're not actually making any changes. The footprint of the building isn't changing, but we're happy to increase the landscaped area where possible. So we just request that the condition actually refers to that 9.75 square meter target for the purposes of achieving compliance at CC stage, because as I mentioned, that condition has actually been left quite open. So we just want to make sure that it's something that the certifier can tick off when it comes to the CC.
Just to make sure we've got the right condition. It's condition which one?
Condition 2C. Sorry, this one as well. So 2C, where it seeks to increase the amount of landscaped area on the site. And it talks about the area to the west of the lower ground floor terrace.
Okay.
So as I said, we're happy to provide that area, but if we could just include that target, then it would make it easier for the certifier.
Yeah.
And otherwise, I'm happy to answer any questions that the panel may have.
Panel, I don't have any questions, and thank you for that clarification. Jan, do you have a question?
Yeah, just one question, Jenny. I'm looking at the photo montage, and perhaps it doesn't really depict what the materiality or colour is of the screens to the front. It's very contrasting, and I was just wondering whether, in terms of this streetscape with those delightful Victorian cottages, it could be less contrasting, I suppose.
Yeah.
And the photo montage, and this is A560, may not be depicting it because at the end of the day, it's alterations to what was always previously referred to as, say, semis. So, and then we've got the Victorian house next to it. And I was just wondering whether it's at the moment it's a quieter presentation to the streetscape than what the photo montage shows us.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to understand. So in terms of that finish, you're looking for something that's more in keeping with the adjoining.
Yes, I would have. I mean, it's just I just wanted your comments on it and your response, so I can understand. As I said, we've got these gorgeous dwellings on one side of it, and this certainly will stand out in the streetscape with that dark contrast with the finish of the masonry.
Yeah, so I mean, we're happy to consider anything the panel thinks it should be changed to, but I would note that the existing buildings are this grey colour and quite unappealing.
No, I agree, but they sort of don't jump out at you in the streetscape. At the moment, I see those dwellings, the gorgeous dwellings, and I just wanted something a little quieter next to it. But, just take us to the materials and finishes of that colour.
Let me just see. I'm just looking now at the...
Dan, are you talking about the render, or are you talking about the metal screening to the window?
The metal screening, the
dark metal screening.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just...
And I've just turned to materials and finishes.
I'm just opening that up now myself. 540.
On PS1 privacy screen type 1, it doesn't have any color. It just says anodized aluminium finish, which would imply a silvery gray color. So, is that color, or is it in fact a powder coated painted finish, which looks quite black in the photograph?
Well, it does say, that gives the option there. You're right, Helen. It says powder coated or anodized.
Yeah.
So unfortunately that's I don't have the architect here with me, so it's difficult for me to confirm exactly, but it is something maybe that we could address by condition if it has to come back in to the heritage advisor, given that it's a conservation area, to their satisfaction, and have something in a lighter color as opposed to what's been shown on the photo montage.
Yeah, but I mean, it was just an observation, and the other panel members may not agree with me, so I'm just raising it in case there is a condition to that effect.
Okay, yeah, that's noted.
Any other questions? Sharon? No. Alison? No? Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jenny. And you've heard Jan's issues, so there might be some condition to that effect.
Okay, not a problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so the next one we have is 24 Watkins Street, Bondi. Alterations and additions to an attached dwelling, including ground floor and first floor. There are no submissions received for this application and no registered speakers, unless I'm looking at the wrong agenda again. Any registered speakers? No. Okay. All right, well then we might just go on to our next one, which is 72 Gilbert Street, Dover Heights. Addition of a pergolas and 5 suspended first floor terrace of improved dual occupancy. There was submission received, and the only registered speaker is for the applicant, which is Mark Shapiro. So Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, okay.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, panel, for your time. As discussed, I'm the architect for the proposal. So the proposed pergolas to the west-facing bedrooms provide vital sun shading, preserve the outlook, and thereby reduce the reliance on energy-consuming air conditioning. In our view, the impacts of the CDC, by definition compliant, should not prejudice the separate DA proposal, which we believe has zero impact. Based on our own view assessments, the proposal will not cause any further view loss to 102 Dover Road. It is set in by 600 millimeters from the edge of the wall, and the angle of the view renders the proposed structure to be invisible. We've completed our own internal view assessment based on the main bedroom view that confirms this. There's actually a simpler way of assessing any view impact by erecting a timber replica structure in the exact location of the proposal. Indeed, the builder did this and offered to hold up the structure so it could be viewed by the council assessing officer from the property behind. If indeed there was any visibility of the structure whatsoever, our client offered to reduce the proposal to the extent that it is visible. It is our understanding that the builder showed the temporary structure to the assessing officer, who photographed it and advised that he would knock on the door of the neighbor behind in order to view it. We understand that an attempt was made unsuccessfully. However, we did not hear further on this. Furthermore, the discussion relates to the pergola structure on the southern dwelling, but there's no suggestion that the pergola structure to the northern dwelling would cause any impact. So at the very least, this should be approved. The 16% height non-compliance is only a technical one based on the fact that the basement level of the approved CDC was already excavated and constructed at the time of lodgement of this DA. Thereby, the existing ground line is considered at that new level. In reality, the height non-compliance in comparison to the previous and the natural ground line is only about 1%. Overshadowing is barely perceptible, as can be seen in the diagrams. It is for these reasons, the environmental benefit primarily of the proposal and the lack of impact, that we request that the panel recommend a deferred commencement approval on the basis that the actual impacts are given due consideration through the erection of a temporary replica structure and subsequent assessment of the said structure from the property behind at 102 Dover Road. If there is indeed any visibility of the replica structure, we would agree to reduce the structure to the extent that it is not visible and to the satisfaction of council. We're in agreement that there should be no further view impact to the property at 102 Dover Road, and we believe that this is the fairest and most sensible way forward. And I'm here if you have any questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I guess we're wondering why you didn't include this in your CDC in the first place.
The CDC didn't allow for it because it was that minor height breach of the 8.5 meters. We couldn't actually include it in the CDC. And under exempt development, I think the height didn't allow for it either, a structure of that. We did receive advice from our certifier that the only way was through a DA.
Okay, Anna, do you have questions? Looks like Jan, you have a question?
Sorry, another question. Yes, Mark, just unfortunately, the panel can't give a deferred commencement on the basis.
I see. Okay.
So what I'm going to say is that if the panel, in the event that the panel does refuse it, you can always come back with a Section 8.2 review.
Okay.
But we can't do it as a deferred commencement.
Right. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that. So, well, then we request an approval on the basis of no impact.
Yeah, I think it's difficult to say there's no impact based on the evidence that we have otherwise. But are there any other comments?
I do have, apologies for interrupting. I do have I could share on the screen our own. It hasn't been formally submitted, but our own view assessment from that that bedroom window view that was provided in the submission. If you want to see it,
it's fine. I think.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mark.
Okay. Thank you.
Take that into consideration. Bearing in mind we can't offer a deferred commencement as an alternative.
Okay, noted.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
The next application we have is for 168 to 170 Hastings Parade. It's the modification to the basement level. And we have one submission received, and registered speakers are for the applicant, Leah Cosmeta, Adam Hatter, and Mark Bartel.
Afternoon, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, panel. We acknowledge the detailed assessment in the planner's report and concur with their assessment that there are no external impacts associated with this proposal to expand the basement below the northern side of the building. We accept the recommendation and all conditions of consent. Being in agreement with the report, I have only two brief comments I'd like to make for your review, and it's more just to provide some further clarity more than anything else with respect to the number of submissions and also the conditions. The planner's report identifies there was one unique submission lodged from 164 Hastings Parade, 2 doors to the north of the property. There was, however, another submission received from the immediately adjoining northern property at 166 Hastings Parade, and that sits between the subject site and the listed unique submission property. That submission from the immediate neighbour is a letter of support for the proposal. It was offered by the neighbour's legal representative, Mr. Anthony Boscovitz, who is well known to this panel and appears quite often. The letter of support was offered on the premise that council receive a collection of structural and construction methodology reports that were provided to this neighbour and were independently peer reviewed at the direction of the neighbour and provided to council as part of the application process. They were prepared at the start of the application and were part of an open and constructive dialogue with this neighbour. These have all been reviewed as part of council's consideration of the excavation impacts and now form part of the documents listed in the approved documentation amended condition number 1. As stated in the report and as part of council's own assessment of these already peer reviewed reports, the planners sought a further independent engineering peer review of their own, and that peer review also found the reports to be acceptable and recommended additional construction monitoring conditions, and we accept all of those. Briefly, and secondly, we note the condition relating to the car display case. I understand the rationale behind this and don't seek to challenge that condition. All other conditions are in accordance with the original consent, and we raised no issues with those. You'll see the principal architect, Adam Haddo, is available, as am I, and I've been provided with a list of numbers of engineers if I need to call them if the questions get too technical. Thank you.
Have we got any very technical questions?
Mine's not technical, mine's just very basic.
Fantastic. I'll try that one.
Hello, Lee. Look, I'm just looking at it in terms of Super Studio and Waverley Council and the necessity for this exceedance in the FSR now. And that is something that the panel has to take into consideration with the FSR being really blown out. So I just want to give you the opportunity to respond.
Thank you. The excavation draws some more FSR and technical grounds by the recalibration of those areas and them being counted towards FSR for the first time. The development as a whole still sits 180 square metres below the buildings that we are replacing. So this building and this development has always been constructed on the premise that it is smaller than the collection of buildings that it replaced. It remains significantly smaller. And this basement is in an area that would be ordinarily anticipated by development on one site or the other. It just happens to be combined to both. There's a need in this context for the current occupants of the site, and it might be a throwaway line in the LEP, but the objectives are to provide for the amenity of the future occupants of the community. This member of the community has many things to store. This is the needs and his housing needs for this property for him. And given the lack of impact and the agreement by the neighbours of the excavation and the fact that none of this will be externally seen when we finish, we think it's reasonable.
So the two sites are owned by your client. Yeah, and I'm just trying to understand then, looking into the future as to how is this consistent with, say, orderly and economic redevelopment of the adjoining site, whose basement area is being utilised?
So the original consent dealt with that in quite some detail because there were a number of apartments being removed for a single dwelling, a large single dwelling. That was all considered by a previous panel and agreed that it met the zone objectives, which are to provide a range of housing typologies. You often see blocks of flats in this locality removed for a house, and down the road you see houses removed for blocks of flats. So there's an equitable balance of those uses and housing typologies in Ben Buckler. In terms of the excavation under this building, as I said, it's relatively equivalent to if you had this building and excavated on its own right. This is the type of basement that you would anticipate underneath it. It's in fact much smaller than what you'd have on all the adjoining sites. It just happens to connect to this already existing basement of 170 Hastings Parade on the right-hand side.
But in terms of orderly development of the other site, it actually limits the kind of flexibility of a basement, which would be useful should that adjoining site is to be redeveloped.
Well, above ground is a single property, so irrespective of whether or not there's a basement, half of the dwelling would need to be demolished for these two sites to be two sites again. And so the basement doesn't affect that attribute of the development. Either this is a single site with a single development, or it's a carved off half house, which would be at the basement as well.
Okay.
I was just going to add, Helen, probably the reason that it's appearing as two sites at the moment is because the southern site has an existing basement. So the retention of that, what was once a party wall, kind of infers that it's two projects, but it's a single project. So there's no, like it's a house, you know what I mean?
So that it's a single house on two lots.
It's two lots that have been purchased to make a single house. It's just that one of the lots has an apartment building on it that's being retained and converted. And then the other lot, the building has been demolished and the living spaces for the house are being contained, you know, on what was that old lot, if you know what I mean. But it's for the purpose of the end project, it's one lot. It's just was at some point two lots.
But is there an intention to demolish this residential flat building at some stage? Or
It's been demolished, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a consent for a dwelling. Sorry, Adam. There's a consent for a dwelling that stretches across the two lots already. And there is also consent for the basement to connect through the subdivision line in the centre of the site already. This is just to expand a portion of that already approved basement that extends across the boundary in the middle.
Okay.
Sorry, Adam.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all we need. Okay, great. Now, the final one for today is 173 Blair Street, North Bondi. And I'll just ask Alison to leave the meeting at this point and we can reconvene in the follow-up meeting, the determination later. Thank you, Alison. So in regard to this one, we've had a number of submissions received, quite a lot in fact, but we only have one registered speaker from the objectors and the applicant registered. So is Adam Thompson here today? Yes. Adam, would you like to address the panel? You have 3 minutes to address the panel. and then we may ask some questions following that. Thank you. And I think he's still on mute. Are you ready to speak, Adam? We can't take, can someone take him off mute? I can't seem to do it.
Try Control 6, Adam.
We still can't hear you. You can't unmute it? Emma, can you unmute Adam at all?
No, we can't. We've tried, and it's, I think, a speaker issue at his end.
Maybe you'll just have to log out and log back in again, Adam.
Perhaps you could come in on your phone, Adam.
It's gone. Hi, everyone. There were 16 unique submissions on this, just for everyone's information. Has Adam come back in again? Oh, yes, there he is. Okay.
Thank
yes,
you, Helen, and
yes, we can
apologies for the technical issue there.
No, that's okay. So, you're back. So
thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I wanted to thank Edwina Ross and Ben Magistral, to the council assessment officers, for identifying all of the many issues with this application, and for recommending their refusal. And I'm hoping that it does get sent through to a final refusal given the issues. My personal objections, well, there's three main ones, all stemming from the excessive height of the proposal. It's overshadowing and loss of solar access in my building, loss of privacy and loss of views. My house is a semi-detached. I sit to the north of the proposed development, and being a semi-detached, the only windows I've got on one side of facing the development. And given the height of it, I'm going to lose sun, privacy, and my views. The maximum wall height for the zoning area is 9.5 metres. What this proposal has done is that they've taken the roof section, which is vertical, and they've said that that's a roof, not a wall. And so they've built what they call a roof up to 11.8 metres. And that additional 2.3 metres, which is clearly a wall because it's vertical, they're saying is compliant with the maximum wall height, which, according to Waverley DCP figures 16 and 17, show that the maximum wall height anything above the 9.5 metres has to be pitched to a maximum of 35 degrees. So vertical surface clearly doesn't meet the requirements of a wall, of a roof. It's a wall, and that causes huge detriment to my property. I don't know if you want me to talk in detail, Helen, about those three issues. I think they've already been identified by the council officers. You would? Oh, sorry, I think you're on mute now.
I think we have it. It's the height, the views, and the amenity in terms.
So they're the main three, thank you. And the others are streetscape, the development, the visual bulk of it, and the contrasting style to the rest of the street just doesn't fit in. There's an excavation right near the board, right on my property boundary as well, which wasn't identified by the council recommended refusal. It is right on my boundary. It's a drop of 1.475 metres. And my only issue with that is that the existing fence isn't particularly strong. So my kids could fall through it, they'll fall down a steep height. So I don't have an issue with the excavation, but if it does get approved, then I'd like for the developers to pay for an improvement to the existing fence. It's a bit old and rotten, and if they make it a proper safe fence, then I have no issue with the excavation. But until that comes in, then I think it's a basis for refusal. The bins have been identified already as well. They're up against the boundary right near my front entry path, whereas they should be located inside the structure, and the landscaping as well. There's quite a few issues with the proposal.
And you know that it's been recommended for refusal.
It has been recommended. My purpose for coming here today is to give any other information that may be requested in the hope that it does indeed get refused.
Okay. Thank you very much, Adam. I'll just ask the panel if they have any questions or comments that Sharon? No. Okay. And I have no other questions. Sorry. Yes, Adam.
If I could ask one question, can I ask the reason for Alison's nature of conflict?
She didn't actually state, she just said she had a conflict with regard to this property, but yes, it may be that she knows some, I don't know.
Yeah, I can just step in there. She gave advice to one of the objectors about what to include in their objection. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
That's okay.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. We'll now hear from the applicant, David Waghorn. You've been from Planning and Ingenuity. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First off, whilst we understand the time processes and everything involved with council, it is unfortunate that it did result in a refusal, because we think there could have been some amendments made to this scheme along the way to satisfy some of the concerns. We would like to thank Edwina and Ben, regardless, for the way they handled this application. Whilst we disagree with parts of the assessment, of course, we do thank them for their assistance. Look, we understand there's certain realities involved with a recommendation for refusal. We hear the comments from council staff, we hear the comments from the objectors, and we especially hear the comments from the DRP. Look, the scheme we've got now will be changed. We are just working on a way forward, be it a new DA or appeal, I'm not sure. But note that we will be taking into consideration the issues raised. I really don't have much else to say, but here to answer any questions if there are any. You're on mute.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions from any members of the panel? No? Oh, sorry.
So David, you're saying that you anticipate that there needs to be changes in terms of the proposal that's been presented.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to understand, would they be such that you could do an 8.2 review?
They could be. I mean,
it's not a matter for me, it's a matter for council to decide whether that's within the scheme of things. Yep.
Yes, that is one of the options. Sorry, I neglected to mention the 8.2. We would consider an 8.2 if the clients choose to go down the path to send it back to council, or they may choose to go to appeal. I'm not briefed on.
Okay. Well, can you just respond to some of the issues that have been raised by the council? For example, a reduced front boundary from 15 metres to 12.12. The length of the building in terms of internal courtyards, its presentation to the streetscape in terms of the DCP character statement.
Mm-hmm. Starting with the, it was the street setback, was it not? Front setback?
No, it was the boundary, the width of the boundary, width of the lot.
The width of the lot.
Council have a 15 metre.
Yeah, it doesn't meet the 15 metre requirement.
Yeah, I've got a different interpretation on that than I think I saw in the council requirement. My reading of the DCP relates to it shouldn't isolate adjoining sites, and it doesn't necessarily relate to the subject site. I understand what council is saying, but respectfully disagree. Needless to say that even if it was non-compliant, the site is zoned R3. I think we can demonstrate that a residential flat building can be constructed there. I do note that surrounding properties, especially to the east, are at a lower density than what is proposed, but that is a fairly small pocket of sort of 1 and 2 story dwellings or semi-detached dwellings. And the zoning allows for residential flat buildings. Now, this area is rather eclectic in scale. We do hear the objectors in terms of potential view loss impacts. I have seen the photos for the first time in this report. That is something that we will need to take on board. But also I think the neighbours need to take on board that generally the proposed development is permissible with a height limit of 12.5 metres. We are under that. We're under the FSR, and the setbacks, especially to the eastern side, comply.
What about in terms of the wall height?
The wall height, yes, in general, as it presents to the street, the wall height is compliant. The wall height is non-compliant under the current design, where it creates, I suppose, gable ends on that, on that attic level.
You heard the objector's concern about the wall height being, higher than what the wall height should be, because supposedly some of it's classified as roof, and it doesn't really satisfy that.
Correct. Look, some of it is classified as roof, some of it is parapet height, but again, it's all under the 12.5 metre height limit. So that is something that we will definitely have a look at. In terms of the building length, you'll appreciate the site is much longer than it is wider. So we've got a constraint there that we need to elongate the building. And the reason for those indents or articulation points is not to lengthen the building, but to break up the building form and mass. So to provide that articulation. I do note the comments from council staff about the potential for infill, but to us, they play an important role in providing amenity, and there is no intention to infill those. But in saying that, again, when we come to the next application, we will look at potentially condensing the length of the building if that has an improved impact on adjoining properties. But if that is done, then we will probably need to seek some dispensation on the articulation for the wall. So not an easy solution, but we hope to find one.
There also doesn't seem to be, it seems to be quite a deviation in terms of landscape and communal landscape areas and setbacks. How are you addressing that?
Well, we are compliant with the overall landscaped area and deep soil landscaped area. I think the comments from council related more to landscaping on the side boundaries. Noted. Yes, we will have a look into that. There's probably the potential there to provide some landscaping on the eastern side, but I think we're constrained on the western side by the easement. So we can't really put any trees on or any structures on that side.
And the front setback?
Front setback, again, I don't think there was an issue raised about the front setback and the character, but if it's a case of simply providing more trees or a better landscape character, yes, we can certainly look at reducing the size of that ground level terrace.
Any other comments or questions?
No, thank you. That was useful. Yep.
Sharon? No? No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, David. And we will consider your representations in our deliberations. So now we have come to our agenda. So I will close this meeting and we'll reconvene in a separate meeting to make the determinations.